Okay, imagine this. You find a time capsule, not from the 80s, but from the age of the apostles themselves. Inside are 7 ancient letters that paint a picture of the early church so clear and so specific that for centuries top scholars insisted they just had to be fake. Well, this is the story of that time capsule and the incredible man who wrote it.
It's one of the biggest questions in history, right? I mean, we have the New Testament, which tells us all about Jesus and the first apostles. And then, a couple hundred years later, we have the writings of the great church fathers. But what about the in-between? What happened in that critical gap? What did that very first generation of Christians, the ones who actually knew the apostles, what did they really believe?
You know, for historians, this period, sometimes called the post-apostolic age, is kind of a black box. It's this super important handover period, the moment the baton was passed from the apostles themselves to the next generation. And honestly, if you don't understand what happened here, it's really hard to understand everything that came after.
The best way to think about it is like a giant bridge with a huge chunk missing right in the middle. We can see the start of the bridge in the Apostolic Age, and we can see where it ends up in the Patristic Age, but that crucial connecting piece is just gone. Or at least it was gone. Until we found the writings of one man. The man who, it turns out, is the arch that completes that bridge.
So let's meet our key witness. His name is Ignatius of Antioch, and his story isn't just some dry historical account, it is incredibly dramatic. We're talking about a man writing under a death sentence, desperately trying to preserve the faith that he learned directly from the apostles themselves.
So let's place him in time, because this is really important. He was born around 35 AD. I mean, think about that. That makes him a contemporary of the apostles. By 69 AD, he's already the Bishop of Antioch, which was a huge center for early Christianity. But then, around 107 AD, everything changes. He gets arrested under the Emperor Trajan and begins this long, hard journey in chains all the way to Rome, where he knows he's going to be martyred. And it's on this final, fatal journey that he writes 7 extraordinary letters that are going to echo for the next 2,000 years.
And this, right here, is the most crucial part. Ignatius wasn't just some random guy writing down his opinions. The ancient tradition is crystal clear. He was a direct disciple of the apostles John and Paul. He learned the faith from the source. So when he writes, he's not just theorizing. He believes with every fiber of his being that he is passing on the authentic, unchanged faith taught by the apostles themselves. So what on earth was in these letters that sparked centuries of debate? Well, it turns out they contain a shockingly clear blueprint of what the early church looked like, how it was structured, and what it believed. For a lot of people, it was a little too clear, almost suspiciously so.
First off, Ignatius talks about a very specific church structure, and let me tell you, there's zero hint of a loose, freewheeling, democratic community here. He lays out a clear threefold hierarchy. You have one bishop at the top who leads, and he's supported by his presbyters or priests and deacons.
And just listen to the authority he gives to that bishop. He's not mincing words. He says the bishop presides in the place of God, and then tells the people to do nothing, not a single thing connected with the church without him. This isn't just a friendly suggestion. It's an incredibly powerful statement on church unity and authority, and it's coming just a few decades after the death of the last apostle.
Okay, the second major point he makes is about the Eucharist, what many call communion. For Ignatius, this was absolutely not just a symbol. He is crystal clear that the earliest Christians believed in what we now call the real presence.
In fact, he actually uses this belief as a kind of litmus test. He identifies heretics by the fact that they stay away from the Eucharist. Why? Because, as he says, they do not confess that the Eucharist is the flesh of our Savior Jesus Christ. Notice that language. He doesn't say it represents the flesh, he says it is the flesh. For Ignatius, this was a core, non-negotiable belief, one that he was literally about to die for. And finally, there's this really fascinating way he talks about the church in Rome. See, he writes to a bunch of different churches on his journey, but the letter he sends to Rome, it just has a totally different vibe. He gives it a kind of special status. He calls it the church which holds the presidency and says it presides in love. Now here's the thing. In his other letters, he gives instructions, he teaches, he commands, but not to Rome. He's much more deferential, almost like he's acknowledging a higher authority there, the one established by Peter and Paul. It's a striking difference in tone that really suggests a recognized preeminence, right from the jump. So let's just step back and put it all together. Here, in these 7 letters from around 107 AD, we find a clear church hierarchy under a single bishop, a rock-solid belief in the real presence in the Eucharist, a special recognition for the Church in Rome, and, get this, the first surviving written use of the term Catholic Church. So now you can probably see why these letters became such a historical flashpoint.
Because for a lot of later scholars, especially during the Protestant Reformation, this picture was just, well, it was too Catholic. The argument quickly became, no way. These letters can't possibly be real. They must be forgeries written centuries later to try and justify Catholic claims. And that really became the central question that raged for centuries. Was Ignatius a genuine, authentic witness to what the apostles taught, or were his letters a clever fake, a piece of propaganda designed to rewrite history?
So the arguments pretty much lined up like this. On one side, the critics said, look, these doctrines are just way too developed for 107 AD. Plus, they pointed out that there were different versions of the letters floating around, which made all of them look suspicious. But on the other side, defenders said, no, this isn't developed, this was just the original teaching from day one. And they had a star witness, Ignatius's own friend Polycarp, another direct disciple of the Apostle John, who personally vouched for these 7 letters.
For hundreds of years, this debate just went back and forth. But in the modern era, with new tools for historical and textual analysis, scholars started digging in, determined to find a real answer.
And here's the incredible twist in the story. The scholars who finally settled the question, they weren't Catholic apologists trying to prove a point. They were actually leading Protestant academics who went into the research with a completely impartial eye. And the verdict from the scholarly community was just overwhelming. Guys like Theodor Zahn, a brilliant Lutheran scholar, and J.B. Lightfoot, an Anglican bishop, did this exhaustive, painstaking research, and they both concluded, without a doubt, that the 7 core letters are authentic. They are not later forgeries, they are a genuine product of the early 2nd century, written by a man who knew the apostles.
So, with the authenticity of the letters now firmly established, what does that mean for us? What does it mean for history? It means that our man in chains, Ignatius of Antioch, is exactly who his friends claimed he was all along. He is the apostolic bridge. He's the guy who connects the dots. His letters aren't a later invention. They are a direct transmission of the faith, a message in a bottle sent from the Apostolic Age to all the generations that would follow. He gives us an unfiltered snapshot of what that first generation of Christians truly believed.
And think about this for a second. When Ignatius uses the term Catholic Church around the year 107, he just says it. He doesn't explain it or define it. He uses it like it's a term everyone already knows. This picture of the church he gives us isn't some later development. It's an image taken right as the sun was setting on the age of the apostles.
And all this really leaves you with a final, kind of mind-blowing thought. Without these 7 letters, written by a man in chains on his way to be executed, a huge, crucial piece of our picture of early Christianity would just be gone. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, how much of what we know about the past hangs by just a few fragile threads that somehow, against all odds, managed to survive.